coming out of the tomb. Now, the resurrection of Lazarus is not mentioned in the other Gospels. All right? You can read some of the critics. The worst critics of the Bible are the theologians, the exegetes, the people who teach Bible in college are the worst critics of the Bible. Many times. They say, that's just, it didn't happen because it's not in the other Gospels. It's only there, so it's made up. How would you answer that? Yes, tell me.
Because John was written later.
Yes.
And for one, it was John looking at what wasn't said in the first three Gospels.
Yes.
And bringing more. It's like, well, this wasn't brought up, so let me bring more.
Okay.
Of some of the things that were left out before.
True.
To
Yeah.
further prove Jesus was.
Yeah, John was probably written about the time of Revelation, and the letters of John at the end of his life. You're right. That's a good point, but there may be another reason why it wasn't written, why this gospel was written at the end. What if the early gospels, like Mark was written, maybe the first gospel written around 60, what if Mark had mentioned the resurrection of Lazarus around 60? Do you think that maybe Lazarus would have been in danger? What do you think of that option? The fact that it's only basically when this generation of priests was gone. I mean, those who wanted to kill Lazarus remembered he was risen from the dead, but if it's written much later, maybe they forgot about that story. That's my theory too. Now, the other Gospels mention two or three, at least three other resurrections, which are not Lazarus. So if we argue like that, we could say that because John does not mention those others, then they are made up. But John says at the end, there's many, many other signs that Jesus did. We can't even count them. Just because he gives only one. In fact, notice that John gives only 7 miracles. Did Jesus perform only 7 miracles? That's ridiculous. There is a purpose in telling this one, because it has a significance. It doesn't mean that there were not others. The Gospels are not complete bibliographies of Jesus. It's not their point. The point of the Gospel is teaching about Jesus and giving the meaning of his life. Because John says if you want to write everything about him, you take a lot of books. Okay? So it's selective. So you can't, that criticism is very often the criticism that I look at, I've heard, are kind of ridiculous. Yes. Yes.
So if you take that concept,
Yes. Absolutely.
right time Jesus was born. And just that, so God's timing is perfect.
It's perfect, exactly.
When the word was delivered, whoever wrote it down, when the Old Testament, the New Testament, it doesn't matter. It was all done at just the right time.
That's true.
So if you
That's true.
read and study
Yep.
and put together
Uh-huh.
entirety,
Uh-huh.
then it was at just the right time.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
whether it's because of the safety of Lazarus, whether it's because
Any other reason?
as time goes by, we have a tendency to forget things as human beings.
Yes.
Some of that's good, by the way.
It is. Oh, I'm glad I don't remember everything yet.
But we have a tendency to we forget.
Oh, we do forget.
And so, okay, Mark was written, and then years later, John was written, confirming Psalms was written, Isaiah was written,
Yeah.
and then we have
It's all like that.
thousands of years later.
Exactly.
It's at just the right time.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. In order to believe that, we have to have a certain concept of God, which is revealed to us in Scripture. And oftentimes these doubts that people have, to me, they come fundamentally, they look for this and that problem, but fundamentally they have a problem with God. If you look at it, is God capable of inspiring? Is God capable of preserving his word? All these questions that people have is because, many times, is because they have a not a very clear picture or even trust in God. And once you mistrust God and you doubt his character and his persona, of God, you're done. Your whole concept of the biblical worldview, the concept of how you do theology, how you live even, is changed fundamentally because your concept of God is not right. So the Bible begins with God and ends with God, In the beginning, God created, So it is a book about God. When we talk about theology, we should talk about God. What is your view of God? Because if your view of God is skewed, how can everything else be okay? It can't. So often that's where you have problem with atheists or this or that or Bible criticism. And then you have to ask the question, how do you view God? Do you think God is omniscience, that he knows everything? Oh, I'm not sure of that. I've had people tell me that. Professors. I'm not sure God knows everything. We have a whole theory in theology that came about 10 years ago called the openness of God. I don't want to get into it, but the idea is God doesn't know what's going to happen. He knows only the past and the present, so things could happen that God doesn't know. And now if you have that view of God, you got a real big problem. Because your God is not omniscience. God doesn't know everything. If God is not above time, if God is dependent on time like we are, we don't know the future. We got a real problem there. How are we going to read the scripture?
Jesus said only the Father knows when he's coming back.
Exactly.
Even within the Trinity,
Yes. Yeah.
there's revolution in the mystery
There is. Or is God all powerful? I mean, when the supernatural is denied, when you have anti-supernatural bias like Rudolf Bultmann, I took classes years ago, and we talked about Bultmann, in Switzerland, the theology faculty founded by John Calvin. Rudolf Bultmann and anti-supernatural. All of the miracles of Jesus are mythology. Even William Barclay, who has a great series of commentaries, taught New Testament exegesis in Manchester. Barclay, when he talks about the multiplication of the bread, he says, when Jesus started praying, everybody got out their picnic. Oh, that's what it was. It was no miracle. This idea, you cannot have miracles, and that comes from the scientific mind. You got to explain something scientifically. So if you don't believe in miracles, a lot of the Bible you can throw away. It doesn't work like that. That's a real weird concept, but it's very common, actually. So just a few more words. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Now you remember Martha and Mary. Luke talks about those two sisters differently. Do you remember at one point Jesus was teaching in the house of Lazarus? What happened with Martha and Mary? Do you remember exactly the difference between the two, or are you sure? You know, Brad?
and one was cooking.
Yes, who was? Okay. Well, we have here Martha say to Jesus, Martha came and spoke to Jesus. Martha in Luke is the practical person. The sister is taking care of things. And she complains that her sister Mary is not with her to help her. She's with Jesus who's teaching. But notice that this is kind of a reverse here, because here John shows Martha, the practical person, as the person of faith. She is the one who goes and and expresses her faith that Jesus has the power. It's amazing. In fact, she expresses her faith in a very unique way. You notice that, Martha. And she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That's tremendous. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Okay. Martha says, I know that he will rise at the resurrection of the last day. That proves that they believe that there was a resurrection of the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Tremendous statement. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. We could go for hours on that. Do you believe this? Notice the practical woman in Luke serving, and taking care. She says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Some of your translations might have, I believed. Does anybody have that in the past tense? Or I have believed. Anybody using mine? What do you have? This is the perfect tense in Greek. It's a special kind of tense. And I think it's better to keep it in the past because it means something that happened in the past that has consequences for the future or the present. So it's a little detail that here the ESV didn't catch. But I think the past, I have believed. She's always believed in him as the Son of God. Remember that Peter confessed Jesus as the Son of God in Matthew 16. She is saying, we already know you're Son of God. We've known that for a long time. It's not because you rose Lazarus that I believe that. Okay, so that's an interesting thing to talk about. And she says, you are the Christ, the Son of God, and Lord. So you have the three things about Jesus that are important. You are Lord, you are the Messiah, and you're the Son of God. In one phrase, she expresses the three things. And then, who is coming into the world. And we'll stop here. We haven't even done the resurrection. But that's the introduction to the resurrection. You see how much there is in there to talk about. So we'll continue next Sunday. Lord willing, if Jesus doesn't return before, which would be nice.
I just want to say, this is significant to me because she is the only female, and other than Peter, she's the only person
Yes?
who makes this confession.
You're right. You're correct. She is.
It's like we seem to go right over to Luke and look at Mary and Martha. And
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
and we don't spend time
No?
with her here.
Yeah, absolutely. We always talk about Martha and Mary, and all. But if we went there, we could see that John is kind of balancing things again, showing that the other aspect. Sometimes we judge things, individuals in the Bible, from one set of texts. But if we go to the other place, we'll see another aspect of that. And that's very important. Yeah, you're correct. This is a tremendous thing that she is. I think apart from Peter in the gospel, she is the only person that makes that statement of faith. And the fact that it's in the past for me is important because that means she's already believed that before. So I think ESV got it wrong here to put the Greek perfect into the present tense. But I don't want to get into that. I think it's time.